So we are going to study friction. But before that, please keep on your videos. I request all of you, please keep on your videos, students. Yes. But yes, Vishal, please keep on your video. So before that, I want to ask, you know what is force? Yes, any one of you? You all have read about this in your previous class, right? Parv, Vishal, Mansi. Yes. Any one of you?
What, ma'am?
What is force? You all have read about this in your previous class. Mansi, Sneha, please come up on video. Yes.
Pull or push?
Yes. Even if you push or you pull, right? That is what we call force. So, forces are of two types, right? That is contact force and non-contact force. So in a brief, I'm telling you that what happens in contact force, if there is object A here, there is object B here, then for contact force, both the objects should come into contact, physical contact, to apply the contact force on each other. But in case of non-contact force, there is no need for that. Even without coming in contact, one object can apply force on another object. That is called, yes, students, that is called, yes, please unmute yourselves. If you didn't get it, then I'll repeat it. But you all have to answer. Please. Yes. If I have one object, I have another object, and this one object is applying force on another object without being coming into physical contact, then that force is called
Non-contact force.
very good, Parv. That is called non-contact force. Is there an example of non-contact force from any one of you? Yes, Mansi, Vishal.
Gravity, magnetism.
Very good. Magnetism. And you heard about electrostatic force also, right?
Yes.
So now I'm telling you, friction is also a type of force. Now tell me, is it a contact force or is it a non-contact force?
Contact force, ma'am.
Yes, very good, Mansi. It's a contact force. Neha, please answer and come upon video. So friction is a type of contact force. Okay, Mansi, you are absolutely right. Now coming to what is friction? We have learned one thing from this slide, that friction is a type of contact force. Now coming to what is frictional force, right? So this is a force between two surfaces. This force acts between, yes guys, repeat with me. This acts between
Two
two surfaces.
surface and
Yes, between two surfaces. And what this force does, it resists the movement. It resists the,
move.
for example, I have this object A and I have another object. This is object B, right? I am placing object B on object A and there is frictional force between the surface of object A and the surface of
And
object B. Yes, Parv, surface of object A and surface of object
B.
B. And that force is called
Silent force.
frictional force. That force is called frictional force, right? Yes, I request all of you once again to please switch on your video so that we can have a live interactive session here. Yes. So that is called frictional force, right? So what frictional force does is it assist in the movement of the object or it resists the movement of the object? Yes, students. Mansi,
Once again, ma'am.
if this is the object and this is on another object and it is trying to move here, right? And there is frictional force between object A and object B. Then frictional force will try to do the movement or it will try to stop the movement. Yes, Dipali. Frictional force always tries to resist the movement. Okay, it always
Resist.
tries to resist the movement. So now, yes. So now there are a few points. Friction is a type of force. The first one is friction is a type of
Force.
force. The second is it is a type of contact force or is it a type of non-contact force?
Contact force.
It is a type of contact force. The third thing is it acts between one surface or two surfaces.
To surface.
Two surfaces. It acts between two surfaces. Okay. Now fourth point. Does frictional force supports the movement of object or it resists the movement of object?
Resist.
Resists the movement of object. Got it? Is there any problem here?
No.
No.
So we have also observed, like if you'll kick a football, what happens? It will keep going forever or it will stop at some point.
It will stop at some point.
Yes, Arji, you're right. It will stop at some point. Okay, but why? Is there any force acting there?
Frictional force.
Yes, due to frictional force. So the football will stop. In the same way, you can see here a boy is pushing the table, right? But still, the table is not moving earlier. Why?
Because
Because
friction.
frictional force is acting in opposite direction. See here, the boy is applying force in which direction? In this direction, right? The boy is applying force in this direction, right? And the frictional force is acting in opposite direction. Can you see that?
Yes.
So it will assist the movement or it will resist the movement.
Resist.
Yes, very good. Now coming to the next slide. So frictional force also depends on many factors. Okay. So Mansi, yes. Can you name some factor on which frictional force depends?
Factor.
Surface. Who told that? Yes, very good. Surface. It depends on surface. See, like if there is smooth surface, you face less friction or more friction?
Less.
Less friction. And if the surface is rough, then the friction is more or it is less?
More.
Yes, the friction is more. So the first thing on which friction depends is the nature of the surface, right? If the surface will be smooth, then the friction will be
Less.
less. If the surface will be rough, then Vishal, the friction will be
More.
more. So if friction is more, then it is easy to move or it is difficult to move.
Easy.
Difficult.
Easy to move.
If friction is more, then it is easy to move or it is difficult to move.
Difficult to move.
Yes, it is difficult to move. Okay. Now coming to there is other thing on which friction depends, and that is called reaction force. That is the force acting between the two objects, right? The force acting between the two objects. And it also depends on this third thing, that is the weight of the object. That is the weight of the
Object.
Yes, Siddhant. Are you getting it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now coming to the friction force is also of two types. That is static friction and kinetic friction. How many types of friction force you have?
Static friction and kinetic friction.
Kinetic friction. Okay.
Kinetic and static.
Yes. Static, the words itself telling. Static friction acts between two objects when the object is static, that is at rest, or when the object is at motion, that is
Kinetic.
See, when the object is at rest, then static friction is occurring between the two surfaces. What type of friction is there when the object is at rest?
Static friction.
Static friction is there, right? And when the object starts moving,
Static.
at that time, is there any friction or the friction is zero at that time?
Friction is there.
Big friction is there, but the value of friction will reduce. And at that time, the friction which is acting there is called, yes, Mansi,
Static.
is called kinetic friction. So, okay. So, see, you are at rest, right? When something is at rest, at that time also friction is acting. But that friction is called
Static friction.
Static friction. And when some object is moving at that point of time also, there is friction force acting on at that time, right? And that friction force is called
Kinetic.
kinetic friction. And if the static friction is at maximum, then that is called limiting friction. If static friction is maximum, then it is called
Limiting friction.
limiting friction.
Limiting
Right?
friction.
So now, kinetic friction is also of two types. You know, there are two types of motion. Either you slide or you roll. Either you slide or you,
Roll.
right?
Roll.
Yes, if you are sliding from this, like you can see here, okay, then there is friction between your body and the slider. There is friction between your body and the slider, right, Siddhant?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and that time, because you are sliding, that friction is called sliding
Friction.
But
Mm.
you have seen the wheels, right? So the wheels are sliding or it is rolling.
Rolling. Sliding.
So the friction between the wheel and the inclined plane is called rolling friction. Is called rolling friction,
Rolling
right?
friction.
So we have learned. Okay, so I'll summarize here. Then we'll go on next slide. The first thing, what we have learned, what is force? Push or pull is called force. Yes, Mansi, push and pull is called
Force.
The second thing, okay, how many types of force are there? There are two types of force, right? One is
Contact force.
contact force and the other one is Arjun?
Non-contact.
For contact force, two objects has to be in contact. Only then they can apply force. And for non-contact force, the object need not to be in contact. Still, they can apply force. For example, magnet can apply force on iron without even coming to contact. That is non-contact force. Okay. And frictional force is a type of force. Which type of force is this?
Kinetic force.
No. Frictional force is a type of contact force. There are two types of force, contact force and non-contact force. For contact force, two objects has to be in contact. For non-contact force, two objects need not to be in contact. So frictional force is a type of
Contact
contact
force.
force because you are sitting there. There is frictional force between the surface and your body. That's why you are sitting there, right? For that, you are in contact with the surface or you are not in contact with the surface.
With the contact.
So frictional force is a contact force or non-contact force?
Contact force.
Contact force. Now, the second thing is frictional force. What frictional force does? It assists the movement or it resists the movement?
Resist the movement.
It resists the movement, right? The third question, frictional force acts in the direction of motion or opposite to the direction of motion?
Opposite to the direction of motion.
Yes, if the force will act in the direction of motion, the speed of the body will increase. But what happens if motion is in this direction? Frictional force will act in opposite direction and will try to stop the
Object.
object, right? So the direction of frictional force is in the direction of motion or opposite to the direction of motion?
Opposite to the direction.
Opposite to the direction of motion, right? Now, frictional forces of how many types?
Two
Three
types.
types.
Two types. The first
types.
is static friction,
Static
and the
friction.
second is
Kinetic friction.
kinetic
Ma'am.
friction. And one second. And kinetic friction is also of two types.
Ma'am, sliding.
Friction and rolling friction. Yes, Mansi.
Ma'am, there are three types of friction. Is there now?
No, Mansi, actually there are branches. Like there are two types of friction, static friction and kinetic friction. Then kinetic friction is also of two types, right?
Okay, ma'am.
Friction is of two types. Now name it. First is static friction and the second is, yes, Siddhant?
Rolling friction.
No.
Sorry, kinetic friction.
And kinetic friction is further divided into two types. That is?
Sliding and rolling.
Okay, now let me write here. See, you are saying that friction and friction is of two types. That is, now tell me, first one is?
Static.
Static and kinetic.
Yes, the first one is static, right? And the second is?
Kinetic.
Kinetic. Now, kinetic friction is also divided into two types. And that is?
Sliding and rolling.
Yes, sliding and rolling. Got it? Now you students got it?
Yes.
Yes. Now, like we have read two types of friction, right? So, the static friction acts when the body is in rest, when the body is in,
Rest.
for example, you are sitting right now, right? So, which friction is acting between the surface on your and with the body?
Friction.
Yes, which friction is acting between the surface and your body? Static friction
Static.
or kinetic friction?
Static.
Static friction, because your body is at rest, and when your body is at rest, then the force between the friction between both the surfaces, static friction. But if you will start sliding somewhere, then the friction that will act will be static friction
Kinetic.
or kinetic friction. Kinetic friction.
Kinetic friction.
But if your motion is sliding motion, then the kinetic friction is of sliding type or rolling type.
Sliding type.
But when you start rotating like this, then the friction will be sliding type or rolling type.
Rolling type.
Got it? Okay.
Yes.
Now there are some advantages of friction, but there are also some disadvantages. So we will learn about both. So this is very interesting to know. Like we have this thought in our brain, okay, friction force is something which stops the movement, resists the movement, right? So, okay, its work is only stopping and resisting the movement. But the interesting thing is that we are able to walk only due to frictional force. Oh my God, how this is happening, right? How this is happening. So, okay. Ananya Menon. Okay. Guys, okay, students, please come up on video only, then I can see all of you. Siddhan, yes. So there are advantages of
Yes, ma'am.
friction. Yes. So we have this thought that,
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
friction will only, it will stop the movement, but it is not like that. It helps us in moving. What happens when you walk? What do? You apply force from your feet to the ground, right? To the road, to the ground. So
Yes,
what
ma'am.
happens in return? The ground also applies some kind of force on your feet, and that is the friction due to which you are doing, you are pushing it backward, you are pushing the road backward, and that is the surface is pushing you forward, and that is the frictional force comes into play. So the first advantage of frictional force is it helps you in what? In walking. Can you walk without frictional force?
No.
Okay,
No,
okay.
ma'am.
Has it ever happened to you that there is something slippery and you tried to walk there and you just fell down?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Why it happened there? Because the friction is less. So wherever the friction is less, you can't walk, right? You won't be able to walk. So for walking, which force is responsible?
Friction.
Frictional force.
Frictional force. Yes. Now, if
Frictional
two
force.
bodies are stick together, that is also due to friction force. Okay, when you like you ride bicycles, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Anai. Okay, you like to ride bicycles?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what happens when you apply brakes? What happens? The frictional force increases, and only then you are able to stop your bicycle, right? So when you apply brakes, you increase the frictional force. And nuts and bolts also, there is frictional force. Only then it will work. Whenever you write on the blackboard, so there is friction between the chalk and the blackboard. That's why you are able to write. If there will be no friction, what will happen? The chalk will slip. The chalk will
Slip.
slip. You won't be able to write. Every time it will slip like this. So you won't be able to write. So if you want to write on a blackboard or whiteboard, so there should be some friction or not?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, like have you seen your shoes from backside?
Yes.
They have grooves like this. That is
Yes,
to
ma'am.
increase the friction. That is to increase the,
Friction.
okay.
Ma'am, I have one doubt, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am, does it provide any grip?
yes, yes. We are coming to that only. Have you seen the shoes of mountain climbers or who goes to trekking?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
You'll see the big spikes
Yes,
on the
ma'am.
back side of the shoes. Why?
Hmm.
They provide grip, right? They provide grip. Otherwise, they will slip and fall. Okay. So these are the advantages of frictional force. The first one is it helps in walking. The second is,
Walking.
yes, whenever you apply brake, this is the cycle. The bicycle stops due to frictional force, right? Whenever you ride, that is due to frictional force. Otherwise, it will slip. You won't be able to ride. Okay. Now there are some disadvantages also. Have you seen the tires here?
Yes.
So can you see the condition of tires? It's the tires are torn everywhere, right? Why? Because
No.
this is because of the frictional force. Constant friction damages the tire like this. And yes, the forest fire also, like if there is friction between dry leaves and air, then what happens? Due to friction between air and dry leaves, there is forest fire. Like recently we had forest fire and we have heard about Los Angeles and there is wildfire. Many of wild animals died in that. So that was something very bad. But yeah, that is also due to frictional force. So these are the disadvantages of frictional force. Now coming to what happens, what you can do to increase the friction. Yes. So the first one is you make grooves, right? In your shoes, you have grooves. So by
Yes.
grooves, by making the surface rough, you can increase the friction. So that is the first one. Okay. Arjit was asking here, we have spikes in the shoes, right? In the soles of the shoes. That also increases the friction. So what we can do to increase the friction, we will make the surface rough. We will make the surface
Rough.
rough. And you have seen wrestlers, right? They apply some kind of powder in their hands like this before wrestling so that they can get a proper grip on the other person, right? During wrestling. And also during kabaddi, we do that. We take soil and do like this so that we can take proper grip on other person, right?
Apply to body also.
Yes, because it helps us in increase the friction. Now, this is the way to increase the friction. That is making the surface rough. What is the process? What are the methods to decrease the friction? So you can polish the surface. What do you do while polishing? While polishing, you make the surface smooth. While polishing, what you do, Siddhant?
Make the surface
Smooth. Yes, Arji. And the other thing is ball bearings. Have you heard about it? You all use bicycles. In that, you have ball bearings. Anaya,
mm,
right? What happens when you want to that gear cycle? I've seen like kids from today's generation are very fond of these types of cycles. What happens like when you take gear? What happens? So this ball bearing starts working. What happens in ball bearings between two surfaces there are spherical balls and which decreases the friction due to which the speed of the cycle increases very fast. The speed of the cycle increases very
fast.
yes. So these are the ways and there is one more way to decrease the friction that is putting the lubrication. Have you seen that in truck, in cars, in bicycles also you put some kind of lubricants which is slippery.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And what happens then?
Yes.
What happens to that lubricant?
Yes.
That makes the surface smooth due to which the friction decreases.
Mm.
Right? Now, fluid friction. Yes, Arjit. So we have the feeling that friction will act. Yuva Kashi. Yes. Any question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I
Yes.
wanted to ask that is friction required for every movement to happen?
Yes. Yes. For movement, we require friction. Um, like for walking also, we need friction.
But ma'am, if I swing my hand from one end to the other, how
Mhm.
does friction occur there?
See, like we are on that topic only. Friction also occurs between the fluids, like in air and water. Also, there is friction. So I'm just telling you the topic here only in the fluid friction. Okay. After that, if you'll have any doubt, you can ask me. So, what happens? We have the feeling that okay, friction will only occur when one surface is solid and the other surface is solid. But no, it's not the case. It can happen when both the things, like both the surfaces are liquid, both the surfaces are gas, or one surface is solid, the other is liquid, one is solid, the other is air. In all the cases, friction forces occurs. It needs not to be solid, both the object, only then friction will occur. Got it? So, have you seen that the shape of the aeroplane, the shape of the fishes, the birds, what, like you see the streamline shape. What kind of shape you see?
Streamlined shape.
What does it mean by
Streamlined.
bullet trains also, right?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So what happens in streamline shape? Like in the front, it is narrow, in the middle, it is broad, and at the end, it is again narrow. In the fish also, right? And the birds also, when they fly, they make this a shape. So what happens? This shape is to reduce the friction. To reduce the friction between what? So in birds,
Oh,
to
air
reduce the
and
friction between air and the bird. In fishes, to reduce the friction between fish and the water,
water.
right? So what happens? I have this much area in front. If air will come, so my whole body will stop the air, or right? So I'll face more friction force. If my body is narrow from the front, then the air will stop me or not? It will stop
No.
me, but not much. It will stop me, but not
Much.
much.
No.
So the frictional force acts between two liquids, that is two layers of water, two fluids. It also acts between air. It also acts between air and solid. It also acts between water and solid. Water and solid example is here. You can see the fish and the water. Air and solid, you can see the example is the bird and the air, right? So that friction is called fluid friction, and we also say it viscosity. We also say it
Viscosity.
viscous force or viscous force, right? Okay, now coming to questions. But before that, Yuvakashi, do you have any doubt in fluid friction?
No, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay, fine. Now coming to question. Question here, let's see the question. A force F applied on the topmost point of a ball placed on a rough surface. Find the direction of frictional force that is created at the bottommost point B. So here frictional force is acting at point B. Now tell me the direction of frictional force. It will be towards the force. It will be in backward direction of force. What is your answer? Yes.
A, ma'am. Force in forward direction.
Force in forward direction.
Force in
Force-
forward direction.
The frictional force will be in forward direction. Here.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
No, the force is acting in this direction, right? Can you see in question what is given? The force is acting in this direction. So frictional force be in this direction, in direction 1 or in direction 2?
Direction 1.
No,
Two.
it should be in direction 2.
2.
Because frictional force always acts opposite to the direction of motion. Frictional force always acts opposite to the direction of.
Motion.
Motion.
So if
Force.
force is applied on the ball in forward direction, then the frictional force will also act in the forward direction, or it will act in the backward direction.
Backward direction.
Yes. So the
Backward
answer
direction.
is B. Answer is
B.
now
B.
coming to this question. Suppose surface of the moon and the earth are equally rough. Okay. A box is pushed on the surface of the moon so that it slides there. Mark the correct statement. It will be easier to push the box on the moon than on the earth. Is it true or false?
False.
It is true, guys.
False.
Yes,
True.
students, true. Because see, on moon, the weight decreases by 1/6 due to gravitation. On moon, weight decreases by 1/6
One.
due to gravitation. And on Earth, the weight is more by 6 times due to gravitation. So if weight would be more, the friction would be
More.
more. So on Earth, weight is more, so friction is more. Friction is more, so it would be difficult to push. But on
Push.
moon, the weight is less due to gravity, because gravity is less. So the friction would be
More.
less.
Less.
Friction would be less. So on moon, it is easier to push the box. So your answer is A.
Box.
Okay, now
A.
coming to the last question. So the first statement, friction always opposes motion. Is it right or wrong?
Yes, true.
Yes.
True,
Yes.
ma'am.
And the second, friction can totally eliminate using lubricants.
False.
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 Lubricants
False.
decrease the frictional force, but it doesn't makes the
Eliminate.
frictional force zero. Yes. So statement one is correct. So answer is B. Get it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And one last thing, what is limiting friction? Maximum limit of static friction is called limiting friction. Maximum limit of static friction is called
Limit.
Limiting friction.
yes.
Limiting friction.
So, is any doubt you have? You can ask me if you have any doubt.
No, ma'am.
Nothing.
Okay, fine.
No, ma'am.
Okay.